Hello, I have a webcam now, so I can start speaking to you guys a bit more directly when I'm trying to explain something super cool. I think my face being involved in what is now a 400 subscriber YouTube channel will make this a bit more engaging. Awesome. I'm not going to look at the camera the whole time. Obviously, I'm going to be coding. And today, we're doing something that is, again, not on the beaten path of what we're building on, which is a slow progression into the application of machine learning to the stock market. I have a script that's pretty long, and it's just sort of sitting dormant now. I used to use it or I created it in college and I thought it was cool. I'm just gonna make an episode on it. I'm gonna show you guys how to code support and resistance levels and use that however you like in your own trading strategies. And if that interests you, you can stick around and watch the whole video. And if you're more interested in simply applying machine learning concepts to the stock market, just move on to the next one. This one's not for you. But maybe we can add these as dummy variables, which we'll learn about later, to the machine learning concepts we'll talk about later. So you might want actually to understand what's going on in this code because it is long. This is going to be a bit longer of an episode, I anticipate. But fortunately, I already have all the code, so I'm just going to be copying it down and explaining it line by line. There won't be any errors. You won't see me mess anything up. So thank you guys for 400 subscribers. Now I have a webcam. Let's get started making a new file. We're just going to call it support resistance or supres supres.ipynd with a U. Great. And then we're going to create some cells. Import the standard packages that we always import. Control C, Control V. And I wanted to also include my little hands, I guess, my hands writing the code. But that was too hard. I'm super happy with the webcam I have set up for now, so it's going to be enough going forward, I think. Afterwards, what we want to do is we want to load in the same data we always do. So let's go to one of our older functions, take this, and paste it right in. So now we can add any interval, any time frame, any ticker, and the study will work every time, no matter what, because of this little if-else statement we have. For the global variables, they're a little bit funky for the support and resistance. We still have ticker, interval, period, look back, but now we have a range and holding period. Range. We want to also define range, window, and holding period. So I know the default values because I have them here. Range I'm going to set to be 2%. Window I'm going to set to be 5. And the holding period I will also set to be 5. Range will be explained later. For now, we're just going to have these as the global variables, and I'm going to input those into our functions as we move forward. So we want to get data from any other function that we take. So this is a good one here from our MACD Bollinger Bands data. Paste that in. And so we're all set. Our data frame off the rip will just look like this. We can define main to start off, and then we'll slowly add to it. Return data frame. And then we're going to make data frame equal get data. And all of our arguments have global variables connected to them. So we need to run this whole file, connect the kernel to the environment, and so now we have 1,926 rows of minutely S&P 500 data. I'm going to change it to daily because there's more data that way. One day. So there's 8,159 rows of daily data for the S&P 500. Open, high, low, close, completely for free. Some people get up on the quality of it, but I'm honestly not concerned. As far as free goes, this is awesome for conducting any sort of analysis that interests you. And today we're doing support and resistance. Now, what we want to do in order to identify support and resistance, there's two parts. So first there is the peaks and the troughs. So when two peaks happen in a certain look back window, then that will create a support line. And you can change the number of peaks you want to be seeing in that certain range. But for the purposes of this study, I'm going to keep it at 2. You can bump it up. You can want to see 3 or 4 to mean like super strong support or resistance levels, which you'll notice doesn't make a big difference if you do conduct that study. Or we can just keep it as 2. And that's what this range global variable is. So I set it to be 2%, which means I want to see 2 peaks occur in the same 2% range. That will define the support or resistance level. There's going to be once we see a peak, either 2% above or 2% below, if another peak occurs within that window, then we have a support level. Now, window can be anything we want. I set it to be 5, but we can set that to be 10. I think 10 is more realistic. So within 10 periods, if we see 2 peaks in the same 2% range, either plus or minus 2%, then that means we've found a resistance level. And then in the same 10 day or 10 period range here, if we see 2 troughs within the same 2% range, then that is a support level. This is maybe better if I draw it out. I'll make a picture and I'll include that in the YouTube video. Anyway, so what we need to do is we need to start defining our peaks and troughs, and that's super simple. So let's identify the lows and identify the highs as 2 different functions. Define identify lows and return the data frame. And identify highs. Okay, so what is a low? A low is going to be the lowest point in any given window. So we've set our window to be 10. So let's leave a look back as 10,000 here. So window is going to be 5, and then support or duration. Duration is going to be 10. Sorry, I misexplained that. So the window is going to be where we're looking for our peaks. So within 5 days, every 5 periods, the highest value will be the peak if a certain pattern occurs. And then within that 5-day window, a trough will occur if a certain pattern appears in this 5 days as well. And that 5 days is going to roll through all of our data. So we'll be scanning for every single peak or trough. Great. And then the duration is going to be how many days we need to see 2 of these peaks or troughs to occur in order to define a support or resistance level. This is advanced code. At this point, we're deep in the weeds. This is no longer building slowly on moving averages and creating simple technical analysis trading strategies. This is actually pretty complex. If you can understand this, you can probably generate your own research on using Python and trading strategies really effectively. So if you're following along, you're a smart cookie. Congratulations. So back to identifying the lows. We're going to change the data frame into a copy of it just so when we modify it, it doesn't take up too much space. Data frame.copy. Data frame equals data frame.copy. And then data frame trough equals 0. We're going to start this out as a column for a low is just going to be 0 all the way through. And then we're going to modify this column based on the patterns shown in our price data. So if the price is here creates a low, like a bottom, then that is going to make our trough column change from 0 to 1. So the rolling minimum is going to be our low column's rolling window of focus. So rolling minimum is going to equal data frame low, which we have, rolling window, and window, of course, is going to equal our global variable. Window equals window, and the center is going to have to be true, equals true. So we have this rolling window of 5 periods that kind of goes all the way through our data frame from top to bottom. And if within that data frame the minimum is the same as a low, then that will be considered a trough. So let's call this, it needs to be the minimum within that window, min, and then the data frame trough is we're going to modify the values in this column to now equal, depending on where, using numpy's where function, data frame low is equal to the rolling minimum that we just defined, then the trough is going to be 1. Otherwise, it's going to be 0. Perfect. And the logic for the peak is really similar, but the opposite. So we're going to take this, paste it in, window is going to also equal our global variable. Window equals window. And then data frame peak instead of trough. Peak, peak, data frame high. And instead of min, we want max. And we want this to be the rolling max. Instead of the minimum, rolling max, data frame high. So we just made some adjustments to our lows function to create our highs function. Rolling max equals 1. So now if we run this function, data frame equals identify lows, and then data frame equals identify highs. Oops. Data frame and data frame. And identify the lows within the data frame and identify the highs within the data frame. And now we should be all good. Great. So it looks like we have one example of a trough. So let's take a look. This low value should be the lowest we see going afterwards. Yep. And I imagine, even though we can't see it, let's print the data frame tail 10 days. Data frame dot tail. So data frame is going to equal main. Data frame dot tail, and we'll do 10. So we have this trough here. Great. Now 591 is the low. So that means that we've found a trough within this 5-day period. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is the lowest value. Great. So we found a trough. Now if we find 2 of these within the same 10 periods, which again we have here, another trough, and I'm going to bump this up to 20. So we can see that we've actually identified a support level right now. There's a trough here, and there is a trough here. So that means that there are 2 low prices that are occurring in the same 10 days. And if they happen to be within 2% of each other, we can just call that a support level. And the same thing happens with peaks. You can see that 590, or the high price was 603, and that was the highest price within these 5 days, happened here. And there was another high, 602, and that was the highest price within these 5 days here. So if these two peaks occur in the same 1 to 2% range, depending on what we define with our range global variable, then we can make a separate column and define that as a peak, or define that as a support level or a resistance level. Once we have that, we can conduct further studies. If you're following closely, you'll notice that this study is going to get pretty long, pretty quick, but it's exciting stuff. If you're still here, you're a real one. Thanks for sticking around. Now, we need to keep building on this. So what's our next function? Now we need to identify support levels. This is going to be a longer function. Fortunately, when we're identifying resistance levels, we can just do the same thing we did for peaks and troughs. Just sort of copy the whole thing and then make some minor adjustments. So just like with peaks and troughs, we're going to include window. So define, identify, support of the data frame. And we need the window and the spread. So we need the window and the range. So window equals window and range equals range. Okay, now from here, we need to take the same data frame equals a copy of it, data frame.copy. And data frame is also going to reset the index. The index always just messes up your calculations, so what I'm going to do is just drop it. It makes it so when we do addition or multiplication of vectors, it doesn't get completely screwed by the unique index that Yahoo Finance provides by default. Data frame equals data frame.reset index drop equals true. Great. Now, what we need to do is create a column specifically for support. And just like with our peaks and troughs, the column is initially going to be 0. And once we reach the requirements necessary to establish that the value should not be 0, we'll make a modification to it later. So data frame support, which is what we're going to modify, is going to start off as 0. Just a column full of nothings. Now, how do we know when we have found a support level? This is where it gets pretty complicated. First, let's do a column for all the indices. We've reset the index, so it's just been dropped and reset to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's no longer a date time index that Yahoo Finance provides. Indices are now going to be just a number that reflects the row in which all of the peaks and troughs occurred. So indices are going to equal data frame dot index. And we need to index the data frame's trough column, data frame trough, to equal 1. Okay, now this means that we have now taken all of our 8,000 rows or so, and instead of every single row, we're only going to have this 8,139, 8,143, or row 8,149. It's going to be a much smaller data frame. So once we add this, data frame equals identify support the data frame. What you can see is every single instance where we have found a peak or a trough, or where we have found a trough in our data frame, 8,149, 8,143, just like we showed here. And we're going to be conducting studies specifically on these indexes so we can know whether or not a support or resistance level has been found. This is just the support function, and we're going to be making 2 for both support and resistance. Indices. Now we understand what that means. So for each index in the list of indices, then we can start conducting our study. So we can't be, what this just does is it makes it so the study starts the duration number of rows from the top of the data frame. So if you're looking for support levels that are found within 20 days or 20 periods of data, you can't suddenly start your study at period 6. You would need to start it at row 21. So this, if the index is greater than or equal to the duration, just makes our study start there. Index minus 20, so minus duration, all the way up until the index. So that's just going to be the 20 rows that came before our current trawl, all the way up until the trawl. So it's going to be a rolling study of 20 days. I hope this makes sense so far. So for each index, we're taking a small 20-day look, or we're taking a small 10-day look at the data frame. If we set duration to be 10, it'll be 10 days. If we set duration to be 20, it'll be 20 days. But it's just going to be a rolling subset of the data frame the whole time. Now, the support range max is going to be the last close value plus the okay, and now that we have our small subset of the data frame defined for each trawl that we've identified, we need to also identify the peak and the trawl. We need to also identify the range that we want in order to identify other peaks and troughs within that small subset. So we have that with the range. With range, what we want is to see two peaks or two troughs occur within the same 2% range of the close price of our small subset, which is info. So I'm going to just define the support range max and the support range minimum to be the close value plus or minus the close value times the range. Yes. So we're going to do the last single value of close prices within this small information subset. So info close dot values -1. I'm going to do range max times, and then info close dot values -1, which is indexing for the very last value in this small subset, info, times, and what we want to do is range divided by 2. Right. So we want to do plus or minus that 2% range. So range max is that, and range min is going to be minus. Info close times, well, we want plus and minus. So the maximum value that we can have in this small subset is the range multiplied by the close price plus the current close price at the end of this subset, and the minimum is the opposite. So we're creating a 2% threshold to find another peak in our to find another trough in our study, in our small subset of the data frame, which we have set to be 10. I'm going to bump it up to be 20. So, for example, let's take a look at our data frame again. If we see two troughs, 1, 2, in the same 20 days, and these are occurring within 2% of each other. So 589 and 593 are within 2% of each other. Then that means these will create a support level. Perfect. And the same thing is going to happen with peaks. If this high value, 603, is occurring at the same time, or in the same 2% threshold as this peak here, within 20 days of each other, which they are, then that's going to create a resistance level. And we'll draw a line to connect those later on. But now we know exactly what's going on. I hope. It's the best I can possibly explain this. It made sense in my head, but I understand that when coding it, it's not visual at all. So I'm going to try and draw some pictures once again. So we can print out the support range every time we do this in our loop, just so it makes sense. I'm going to actually do that, yes. Let's make a print statement with an f string, print f support range. And we need two values here. We want range max and range min. Let's make this, put it in brackets so it looks like a list. And that should be enough. Cool. So now we have all of our support ranges throughout the entire study. We have this returned. I think if I run this again, we'll get a different. Great. So we have all of our outputs here. So now there's since the start of our study, which is really long, data frame equals main. Let's take a look at data frame. It's nothing because, turn data frame. This should work now. So you can see that close prices, because they were 30 years ago at this point, they used to be really low, like $24. Now it's about $614 for a single share of SPY. So these support levels at the beginning were between $25 and $24. And any peaks that occurred within this range would be considered hitting a support threshold, or any troughs that occurred within this range would be considered hitting a support threshold. And we're going to print the same output for resistance as well. Great, that's a very helpful print statement. So now we need to identify the other troughs that occur within this small subset that we've identified. So other troughs is going to be our info subset, or final row, parsed by the trough column. And if there's other troughs in that subset, then we're going to do some more calculations. So I'm just going to start writing the code. Other troughs, other instance, equals info.iloc all the way up until the final row, parsed by, because in our final row, that's where our info ends. We need all of the information until that final row, which is what decides whether or not we're looking at this subset in the first place. Info.iloc. We need to index the same thing up until the final row, except only take the troughs. And if that equals -1, then we have something to work with. So other instance means there's a trough within that subset that is not the trough that we use to generate the subset. So by default, instance in range is going to equal false. And for the index and trawl row in our other so for index idx trawl row in other instance dot iter rows, which lets you loop through each row in your subset, which we have created here, info. I should probably rename this to be subset, but I like information better because it's providing all of the information about this duration that we've defined. I'm just going to keep it as info, even though I keep calling it subset. I'm leaving it as info. So for the index and the trawl row in our list of rows for our subset, which is labeled info, the close price is going to be the trawl row, but the close column. So close price equals trawl row close dot values, just because we don't want to take any pandas series information. You take the values to make the calculations work using NumPy a little bit more effectively. So if the range min is less than or equal to the support range max, so if the close price is greater than the range min, but it is also less than or equal to the range max, then we have found it. We've identified a support level. So we have our support ranges, but we don't necessarily have a support level unless two trawls occur within this range in the duration we've specified. So if we have two trawls that are 25.8 and 25.08 and 24.95, then we would have a support level. But for now, all we have is a bunch of ranges, which happen after we identify every single trawl. So two trawls, remember, need to occur within this range each time in order to create an effective support level. So if the range minimum is less than the close price, but the close price is still less than the range maximum, then what we want to do is define our instance in range to become true. By default, that's false. Instance in range equals true. Nice. So suddenly we can change this to this. Now, what that means for us is we need to great. And then if it's not within range, then peak in range is going to stay false. And we can do an else statement. Control C, else peak in range is not within range. So if there is a peak in range, if we have set the peak within our duration to be true, so instance in range, then if instance in range, then the data frame dot loc of the index, because we're looping through all of our rows in our data frame. And for this row, the support value, support, which we've already defined here as 0, is going to change from 0 to 1. If we have instance in range, then that means that we have found a support level based on our definition. I'm going to add some comments here. Initialize empty support level. Get rows of all instances with traws, and then cycle through all of those. Cycle through all rows after your study duration length is met. After your study duration length. And then this is going to be a subset. Subset of information relating to what happened, duration, periods before you encountered your traw. So instance in range. Instance in range is false. So if instance in range is true, then the support column goes from this empty 0 to a 1. Say we found support if 2 traws appear within the specified range in the specified time period. Great. A lot of work for something that's really simple to draw. But if you're willing to do this work, you'll understand that the drawings you're doing were stupid the whole time. So that's a bit of a spoiler for the results that we will see at the end of this episode, but you probably saw that coming at this point in the series. So let's see. We can print a little support confirmed statement or not, but I think that's covered by this. I'm just going to say peek at index within range, support confirmed. Support confirmed. And I had to get rid of that values there at the end, but this all works. So we have our range, and then peek at index 8 is also within our 20-day look-back period. So that means we have a support level confirmed within the first 20 days. Let's from index index I. So from index 24, 20 days ahead, we have another traw at index 8. So that means within those 20 days, we found 2 traws in the same 2% range, meaning we have confirmed a support level. And we do this all the time. Support confirmed, support confirmed. Sometimes we have multiple support levels. Like this is a quadruple support level. So this is really strong. And what you can do is, say you want the, like right now we just have instance and range is false, and if there is more than 0, it becomes true. But what we could do is we could set this to be like a sum, like we only want support levels where there's 3 or 4 tests. We could modify this code to be, instead of 1 or 2, like it could be up to 3. So say we only wanted these 3, but I'm definitely not doing that. This code is already complex enough. So now that we have support levels, what do we need to do next? We need to do resistance levels. I'm still happy with the webcam. Let's paste this in and just make some adjustments for resistance. Control V. Identify support, and we're going to change this to be identify resistance. Resistance confirmed. So we just made some small adjustments to our identify support level to identify resistance. And then we're going to also add this to our main function. Data frame now equals identify resistance. And we're going to run everything. Support range found. Support range, support range, support range. Any resistance? Yes, there are resistance, but they're found later on. So if you've stuck around this long, you know how to do something really cool. And we're not done. We're about halfway done. So maybe get a glass of water, take a snack break or something, because we're going to keep going for how to test the support and resistance levels. But if you're still here, you already know how to programmatically identify support and resistance levels on any ticker over any time frame whenever you like. That's really cool. This code is posted for free. You can copy it yourself. You now not only have the code, but you have the ability to understand it because you're watching this video slowly with me. It probably took you 30 to 40 minutes. But your ability to understand this will save you. Like, people devote months of their lives to drawing these lines. You don't have to anymore. You now have the ability to code these all yourself. And if you understand how they were made, you can probably recognize that they're not made erratically with the problem of human error. Can I do this? Can I zoom in on myself? Yes. Excellent. So this is really important stuff. You can now, instead of drawing a support and resistance line yourself and hoping and maybe seeing if it works in the past, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. There's a lot of errors that you can make there. You can just know for yourself. You can programmatically identify hundreds at a time, which we're doing here. And now we're going to be able to test whether or not they work in mass amounts together. And once you understand exactly how to identify them, how to create them, how to test them, how to adjust them, you'll start to see that you need to do something a bit more competitive than just these lines to make a sustainable edge. Really important stuff. And you're now in that percentage of people who is aware of that. And I am proud of being both the teacher and seeing you follow along. I know this video is a lot of me rambling because I'm used to just coding for myself and not for the understandability of others, and it's been quite a trip trying to make this make sense to other people. And I've realized I have a long way to go with my own coding ability since I've started these YouTube videos, but we're doing all right. We continue to move. Now, what we want to do is, instead of walking you through writing each line of code for this next part, I am going to paste in the code that I already have from another project of mine. It is created by me, and the plots specifically are amplified by ChatGPT. I am going to be fully honest with you. I pasted into ChatGPT and said, make this better, and it made it so much better. The plots were originally, and you've seen my plots from the other episodes, just bare bones, like green where the resistance level occurred, and then blue everywhere else. It was just not pretty. So I had ChatGPT beef up my plots. So now we can plot these support breakouts and support and resistance zones as well. So we're going to add plot support zones and plot resistance zones straight to this code base. So Control Z. Okay. Perfect. So if we run everything, yes, because we already have all of these columns, resistance, support, and if why don't I, instead of making these new functions, I just add this, I add these to this function, identify support, identify resistance. Once this loop is all done, we just add the plot to the bottom. Ticker. So ticker. Identify support and identify resistance is also going to need a ticker argument, ticker. Plot resistance is going to be X. So once we've identified resistance, we can also plot resistance. And I'll get rid of these two functions here. So our main function stays clean. Fingers crossed. Awesome. So, isn't this a pretty sweet plot? This is all of the, these are all of the support ranges found with TRAWs, and the supports are identified by triangles, and the TRAWs are identified by circles. This plot is all thanks to ChatGPT. I did not come up with the ability to do this. They made these plots way cooler, and there's a lot of information in both of these right now. So I'm gonna, instead of keeping the look back at 10,000, let's just make it 500. No, let's make it 300, and I think that'll do a good job explaining what we're looking at. Yes, it will. Okay, so a triangle or a support level occurs where two TRAWs occur in the same duration of our study within the same range of our mandated point of interest. So if we look here, I'm going to actually change this to be even smaller. Let's change this to be 100. Control B, so we are only looking at this. Okay, now within 20 days, which is here, two TRAWs here and here occurred in that same 2% range. So this triangle is in the same place as our circle, and that's a support level. If it were to draw a line, it would be about right here. And you can see that this isn't a really clean support level because we've set the range to be 2%. And you can make it 1%. But 1, 2, 3. It's possible that it's looking at this one here, actually. No, it's not. It's not. If you make this 1%, I bet that would go away. Yeah. So these are 2% away from each other. If we make it 1%, then these TRAWs are, this is a support level here. Even though we drew it at the close price, we should make it at the low. So Control minus, minus, minus. So this should look a little bit better. Right. So now we have these support levels that are shown at the lows. The plot is following the close prices, but these blue lines, which you can see are no longer directly on those white lines, are following the low prices of the day. So the draws are always a bit lower than the close prices. Now when I do this 2% range, it'll make a bit more sense when they're not so far apart. It's actually still pretty bad. This is only a 2% difference, unfortunately, but that's what we have to deal with. So now we can see that there's probably multiple in this final bit here. And you guys can see what's going on. There's two draws within the same 2% range, so this becomes a support level. There's 2 or 3 or 4 draws within this 20 period look back, so this becomes a support level. Like this used to be a support level, but then it became a support level when we rolled over here. That's just because of the plot. Within our study, each of these might have been support levels, but within our plot, this triangle is going to be the last one we see. Same with resistance. You can see there's 2 peaks here, and this one becomes a resistance level. There's 3 peaks here, and this last one becomes a resistance level. So this is really cool. We're also, just to, for the sake of making this YouTube video not take up your whole day, paste in studies that assess the effectiveness of these support and resistance windows. And I already have those from another function, another code base. So we're going to test the support breakout, and we're going to test the resistance breakout as well. So Control C. So I've just pasted this in. I'm not going to explain it too elaborately, partially for my own sanity and for yours. Now, the strategy column is the same as all of our other functions. It's initially empty, and depending on whether or not we see our necessary rules, we are going to be modifying the strategy based on those instances. So if we see a resistance equaling 1, then we're going to perform some calculations, and our returns are going to be the close multiplied by our bias. So if it's breaking out of a support zone, then we should be short, and if it's breaking out of a resistance zone, then we should be long. And that's denoted by our -1 here and our +1 right here. Super simple. And then we're going to be plotting our strategy next to our ticker. It's just going to be this. So no matter what ticker we choose to use, we can compare going short on resistance breakouts, going short on support breakouts, and going long on resistance breakouts to simply buying and holding the index over however many periods we prefer. This is just 100 days. We're going to bump this all the way up to 10,000. And then we should see a nice beautiful plot at the bottom here. If I don't get an error, I need to also include data frame equals. We need to strategy with the data frame, and data frame equals plot strategy comparison. Data frame, run it. Wow, a lot going on. Strategy has no holding period. Holding period is, we're going to set it to be 5. So once we have our support level broken, we're going to be taking a short position for 5 days. This is a very simplistic study. I encourage you to modify it to your own preferences. But for this one, we're just going to be doing holding period equals holding period. We're just going to be taking positions for what we're defining as 5 days. Strategy is missing that. X. And put this here. This should be good. Perfect. So that's our final plot. So when we're going short, that's all these red triangles, and when we're going long, it's all these green triangles. And the gray line is just buying and holding our ticker. What if we use some different tickers, and what if we use a different time frame? Let's do Tesla on the 1 hourly time frame to see if this gives us different results. There are all of our support and resistance levels. Really beautiful plots that you can now make for yourself. And for a while, it would look like you're winning. You know, that's a lot of trades where you would think, look, I'm profitable, or I'm making money, I'm outperforming the index that I trade support and resistance on. But with enough time and enough tests, which you can now conduct with the click of a button, you can see that support and resistance levels don't really help you over time on any ticker, any time frame, ever. But now we have the ability to include this in more advanced studies. And if you've been following along, you've seen some of the more advanced tactics we've been using, like regression. And we're only going to be building on that. So this is just going to be one of the tools in our toolkit. I don't like fair value gaps, but that's another tool we can use to provide a more educated understanding of the stock market completely for free. Just follow along and subscribe. This was the longest YouTube video I've ever made, and it is likely one of the longest YouTube videos you've ever watched if you are still here. I greatly appreciate you being here, and I hope you appreciate my work. I think I wrote a paper on this in college, just saying, like, I spend a lot of my time programmatically identifying technical analysis strategies, and from what I found, they're completely useless. And it actually got me employed at some firms because they found it to be extremely impressive because nobody told me to do it myself. So if you're interested in taking a similar route, I recommend using this as inspiration or groundwork for your own creative purposes in trading. Trading is not an inherently bad thing that I think everybody should stop doing, but I do think everybody should understand how to do it correctly. And if you're still watching this, which again, thank you so much. I think you're going about it the right way. You are one of the people who can potentially succeed in this space because you're so committed to doing the boring work and getting an understanding of what is obviously correct. So if you're still here, leave a comment. That means you're pretty much my friend at this point. Like, you've been listening to me talk for an hour about really boring stuff. Thanks one more time, and until next time, stay sharp.